Well, welcome to another episode of Practical Business Owner Ideas Series. I'm Kurt Gelner, Director of Business Owner Services for Stearns Financial Group. And with me today is Ryan Seifert, founder and CEO of Teric Technologies. And I am really excited about our conversation today. Ryan is a very unique part of our focus on helping business owners with resources that are specialized. And to say that, and then say that the thing that makes Ryan very special, as his company focuses on fractional IT resources, very much like you might find a fractional leadership resource. What Ryan's team does is fractional IT resources, CTOs, CIOs, as well. And this is something that we'll touch on today. Ryan has a tremendous amount of experience in the AI arena with some very interesting and practical ideas associated with that, as well as some of the ideas around dashboarding and some tool sets that he's developed there. So listen, totally excited about the great conversation we're going to have. And Ryan, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Teric.
Thank you, Kurt. You did a great job in introducing us. What we really do, if you know those companies that just seem like they have a bunch of technology that they need, but they don't know how to navigate it, you don't really know what to apply, we really help companies understand which ones to plug in, what that's going to look like. We will help you figure out the technology roadmap, build out the strategy, and then help you execute it and help on the change management. All of that ultimately means that you actually get technology you're going to use. So to your point earlier, we generally fill a fractional CIO CTO role. But then we absolutely help from our team, from our partners to execute whatever initiatives you have coming down the pipeline. And we've seen that everywhere from getting AI plugged in to building out specialized integrations to doing a lot of process automation and data consolidation.
Fantastic. Well, that leads perfectly into our first kind of my conversation point with you is, one of the things I run across with my clients is this concept that the power of technology, which isn't really understood. And, I hear often, that they're talking about a problem and they're struggling with an issue, and they don't usually or typically think about technology as a way to solve the problem. They think about people as a way to solve the problem. So maybe for a second, in your experience working with clients, how have you dealt with that and helped people see, the vision for, the elements of technology and how they can help business without taking away the idea of people?
Absolutely. And I love the term strategic scaling for your team, for particularly this reason. One of the areas that I think having that technology visionary in your leadership team, in your meetings, is really not just around, hey, can we do this? It's very much hearing and understanding the business problems. Man, my accounting team is underwater because invoices take us so long to do. We have to crunch all these different numbers, and it's hard. It's coming up not as a technology problem, as a business problem, as a team problem. And having that technology person there to hear it and say, well, what parts are hard? Is this something we could solve with technology? It's really introducing a business solution to help your company grow that uses technology. And so instead of saying we need to double our accounting department to finish this, it's saying let's automate these processes. Let's look at the tools we have in place today and start to move those farther along to leverage technology to scale that team better, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it really becomes having that additional knowledge in this ever-changing landscape around technology right on your team to really find different, potentially better solutions to your business problems.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea, and I'll say it because it is an idea. Again, I've talked with companies, and implementing technology has not been their first choice, right? But you've made a great point. The differences between implementing a technical infrastructure and implementing a business solution are dramatically different. And so I think that, that's a great point. And that is a great way for, the folks that are listening here to think about the implementation of technology. Now, the big question is when you run across somebody who is, doing the vampire, I don't want technology, right? Well, how do you help them and how do you coach them in conversation?
So very good question, because so many companies have looked at technology as kind of being, we don't need it, or it's out there, it's for different people to use. And now that COVID's come through, that hybrid workplaces are a very real, very normal thing. Technology is at a lot of people's roadmap is at the end of their life. And so it's where do we go from here? How do we leverage it? The ones that are embracing it are able to find more interesting, more unique, and more solutions that are going to allow them to leverage what makes them different. It's going to give them that competitive edge.
Mm.
And I also think that what you're seeing now from your customers is an expectation on technology. We're seeing many more requests come in. Hey, I need to get this data from your system. I want to plug it into my KPIs and my measure. I want to understand and forecast better when you're going to deliver. So there is a maturing of the technology expectations in many different industries that is also starting to drive this forward. For the companies that have been hesitant to it and that the teams are not used to using technology, that's where the change management aspect really comes into play. Because there is some concern. It might be job security. It might be, I just don't want to learn these new pieces that you have to start to move forward slowly with. And so it's not dropping them into an entirely different ecosystem and changing everything at once, but it's walking with your team step by step to make sure they understand what they're doing, how to accomplish it, and they feel comfortable with those steps. The change management is just as important as building out the technology itself.
Well, and again, what occurred to me as I'm sitting here listening, I remember, and I think that's brilliant. Here is the what flashed in my mind was COVID. And when COVID hit, one of the things that happened in the world of technology is that everyone was addressing their business model, right? Every company in the United States was looking at their business model and asking a question: will it survive with people staying at home? And I mean, I know that you were inundated with opportunity there. Folks saying, I've never had a website. I've never had an e-commerce platform. I've never had to do business with my business customers in an online fashion. And so I think what you're saying, and I think this is extremely important, is there is the idea of putting something together as a system, and then there's the idea of making it all work together with the people. And I think, again, I'll get back to this my experience anecdotally during that time frame. That was one of the biggest challenges that companies were having is, we've got this stuff we know we have to ship to a cloud-based infrastructure. We know we've got to upgrade our website. We know we have to do all this, but how do we do it? And how do we make it work? And how do we turn that into profit, right?
You got it.
So I think you made a great point. I think that's very, very important. And I would add to that. And now here's the next, kind of a conversational point. Talk a second to the folks about technology as a growth element to the business. And, maybe something anecdotal where you've seen a company that, maybe not have been at the edge of technology, but they found that business solution that solved a specific problem. Kind of gave maybe an example of somebody you've seen really turn technology into a growth factor for their business.
And I have a great one. So recently we finished up working on a tool that would allow quotes to be automated into the system. And so I'll give you a little bit of information on this. This is a manufacturing company, and they would get a new design that comes in from one of their customers. Custom pieces, custom items, all the way down to, I need these type of material built to these specs. All this information was having to be pulled from the design docs in PDFs and then hand entered into the system so they could start to track it. And then they would have to go find the materials, all the different vendors. A big piece of this customer's life cycle was speed to quote. So in this situation, it may take you a couple of weeks to get to a quote back out, but if you can reduce that to a couple of days, the close rate would jump significantly. And so the business problem wasn't, hey, can we save this? It's, hey, we can get a lot more sales. We can get a lot more at bats. We can get a lot more happy customers if we can finish this quote process instead of 2 weeks in a couple of days. And so doesn't necessarily sound like a technology problem. Could easily be, hey, we need more people. Can we get more people on the phone? But instead of throwing people at the problem, we looked at how do we scale this well? How can we address many of the different issues in one go using technology? So what we actually ended up building was we were able to use some off-the-shelf AI coming out of Azure. It's called Azure Cognitive Services. And we could take that image, that PDF, that design, drop it into the AI, and then we can pull information back out. That information was all the items, all the details, all those pieces that were having to be manually entered, then gone back and checked and corrected, then started to show up automatically in their system. So instead of each quote taking hours to input before they can even start the rest of the process, all of a sudden now it's down to seconds or minutes as soon as that email comes in. Continuing that path, we were also able to leverage previous conversations with their vendors, try to track the supply chain, who has which inventory at what point in time, so that you still have to call. We're not saying don't call the vendor. You want to make sure the inventory is there. But if you can say it was there 3 days ago when I did a different quote, I'm going to call them first and I know it's going to get here, game changer. Yeah. So now we've reduced the errors, we've reduced the manual entries. We've also then really streamlined finding the pieces. All of that put together started to shave off days and about a week off their quoting time. So that's a very quick, easy, not necessarily easy to build, but quick and easy for them to leverage. Because hey, from the user standpoint, I'm saving time on manual entry. I'm moving up a spreadsheet into an actual system, and I know which vendors to go call. So it was a much less decision-making process, much more time efficient.
Well, I think we're going to do something here for just a moment. Let's get the 5 fingers up. I hope that's that many.
Okay.
Let's talk about the areas of impact: revenue,
Absolutely.
operational efficiency,
Yes.
customer satisfaction,
In a big way.
scale in the business,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, at the end, business growth momentum, basically increasing the value of the company by being able to solve this problem.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can turn that quote around faster than the rest of the people in the industry, you're going to have that opportunity and gain that market share. You got it.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that idea. So having ideas like that and being able to implement them, you need the right people to do it. And, you can't always hire outside because, you just don't know necessarily what you're getting generally, but, you have to trust. And that brings me to this idea of the fractional resource. And, I know you've placed a lot of folks in those roles. Talk a little bit about the size companies that use those kinds of resources, and back to this, placing someone who in a company can see the idea of quotes. They can see why that makes sense and can help. But talk a little bit about that for the audience. I know, particularly for me, I've worked with a company that used a fractional IT resource, and actually it was an extremely successful engagement. And I'll talk more about that, but I sure would like to hear your experience.
Okay. And I'm actually going to hit the same story we just touched on, because it's actually a very good example on how those fractional resources and team members and skill sets allow you to really move quickly with reducing the overall cost. So to touch on the quote issue, here's a quote issue that is not just more people. So that's going all the way back to our earlier conversation, someone technically minded in that meeting saying, hey, there may be a better solution. We can use AI. There's some new pieces that can come out that will give us a novel solution to this that is not just people. And then when we look at this overall life cycle, we had many different skill sets that are going to have to come into play. One is the data architecture, the data scientist. That's not something you generally want to hire full-time, and it can be very hard to find. One is the AI to actually integrate it. So in the same situation, now we have a data person and an AI person to get to that novel solution. Then finally, there's the process automation and the integration to the rest of the system. All different skill sets that you may not necessarily need full-time or long-term that you can pull in fractionally to who know the process, who then understand the team, how it works together. So you have a much more successful initiative at the end of the day.
Yeah, what I would say is my experience was a little bit different, but it was really solid. And that is, there was already a project that needed to be accomplished. But what the company realized is they did not have the talent to get the job done, and they couldn't do it at a strategic level. And so anyone who's listening, who's thinking, well, I don't need somebody to come in and be an IT administrator. That's not what I'm after. And in fact, that's not what you would get. What you would get is someone who's a strategist, somebody who is very focused on big picture technology issues, works well with a CEO and other leaders in the business. And back to your point, the best ones, in my experience, have been the first point you made, is they're looking for business solutions that use technology, not technology that does something new. And it's a big difference. So yeah. So I think the fractional idea is a really powerful one, because there aren't a lot of opportunities or resources like Teric Technology in the market space. There just aren't. And so I think, there's no, it doesn't surprise me, how successful you've been. But that takes us to the next topic. And what I'm hopeful is that we weave in some of the work you're doing with dashboards and, your optic tool and some of the things you've done there. I want to weave that in before we have to go. But I want to talk about, I think this has become the rallying cry with business owners, small business owners specifically. I hear about AI, and I hear that AI is the next thing that's going to change the world. It's going to do all these things, but I have yet to figure out how to take it and use it in my own environment. Okay. And you and I talked about this. I read a great article in Harvard Business Review about the idea that AI isn't for, transforming your company. It's for looking for your competitive advantages and using AI to enhance your competitive advantage, not drive out into the broadness of the company. And so, I mean, I'm really intrigued by that idea. But you've done a lot of work in the AI space. Your team does a lot of work. You've used AI with the Optic tool, so you really get it. But just talk a little bit about getting stuff done. How do you get stuff done with AI, and help folks hear it a little practically.
And AI is on top of everyone's mind. How do I use it? Where do I plug it in? And so every time you hear something like that, you want to go in with some caution. AI is very good in certain areas and struggles in other ones. And so when most people end up starting with AI, can I use it to write a blog? Can I use it to help document a paper? Can I use it to write some emails? Yes. When you start to look at it from more strategic, more interesting areas, there are some obstacles that come into play. So a lot of that is operational data, constantly changing information. AI likes to be trained. And so it's trained over existing data, and then you start to go forward from there. If you really want to get this into your company's DNA, to leverage your differentiators, to use AI to really streamline, your first step has to be to prepare the training for the AI, to prepare your data, and to get that integration in place. You have to have the foundation for AI to use, so you can then leverage it across your organization. The nice part about that, the steps you need to take to really get AI plugged in well are going to allow multiple different areas in your organization. So it's not I have to do a whole bunch of work in one spot. It's as you consolidate the information, you can drop AI on top. So to give an example of this is something as simple as project summaries. You can't have AI go in from ChatGPT, have access to your information to understand the current state of your projects to get a summary out. Seems like a very easy thing to do, but it's a very large challenge for AI. Now, if you have your data consolidated, you know how to feed it to the AI, all of a sudden those project summaries become second nature. Very quick, very easy. Let's dive into something a little more into a differentiator space. Going back to our quote example, similar setup. We're getting these quotes from customers. We need to get them out quickly. We're going to use AI to do that. That's the differentiator. The competitive advantage they're looking for is that speed to quote. I can get this quote out faster. I can get that piece out to them faster, which gets them operational sooner than anyone else in the industry. Understanding that the business outcome, where they wanted to compete, what was going to drive their market share increase was that speed to delivery. And we're using AI to help streamline that. So it really does start with understanding where you want your business to differentiate. Then you start to say, how can we achieve that through technology? So it's not, let me use AI and see where I can plug it in. It's where do I want to go to help grow the company, to scale better. And then it's a technical path to achieve that.
That's great. And listen, I think there are a lot of opinions on what AI implementations and outcomes should look like. One of the ones that I get on a regular basis is people asking, how much should it cost? Okay. Now, I'm not asking you to throw, a cost out there, but what I am saying is when you're talking to someone about implementing AI, let's just use this quote client that you had, which is brilliant. What is your kind of your sense of the economics of using artificial intelligence and how does it affect the enterprise in terms of cost? Could you give an opinion of that?
So I'm actually going to take a step back. Any technical initiative, you want to start looking at what's the ROI on this? When is it actually effective for the company to do this or not? One of the areas we get quite a few different requests is, I have a pet project. I want to do this, and I think it's really cool. And so part of our process before we start is we build out an ROI. We detail, here's what we think it's going to cost. Here's where, from what we understand about your corporation, your organization, what we think it'll save, and here are the business outcomes and the positioning for later improvements that you're going to be able to leverage. And we go through that. And if that ROI is not reasonable, we're going to call that out. And so we've turned away work on, hey, this doesn't make sense. Your ROI is going to be 5 years or greater. Wow. We'd much rather you take this approach. And as you grow, if you double in size or some of those lines, let's come back to this initiative. So that goes back into the technology roadmap and making sure you're focused in the right areas. Now, to speak a little closer on AI, there is some really wonderful areas to gain ROI, leveraging ROI. A big piece is strategic scaling of your team, as well as then being able to offload easy decisions. If both those make sense. My favorite quote around AI is that AI is not going to take your job. It's the person who's using AI that is going to replace 10 jobs. So it makes your existing team members significantly more effective. And that's really where we're looking to position it. So it's finding those team members that are technically inclined, that want to use it, that understand the process. And we start to give them AI as a tool to really increase their bandwidth beyond anything you could imagine, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fantastic response. And listen, my brain is turning on what you just said. I'll use this term because it's relatively well understood in the business world as a force multiplier. I mean, if you think about the idea of augmenting an employee, I think that's what you were trying to explain, that the idea isn't replacing people, it's augmenting them so that now the productivity of 10 people is effectively 100 people, right? And I think that gaining that kind of impact using a technology, right, is just insanely powerful. But here's the question that I think I get on a regular basis as well is, Ryan, what is next? What are the things that if you're sitting there thinking and you're talking to a client that's considering implementing an AI solution of some sort, what are you telling them is your idea or your thought based on your expertise? What's next for AI?
So this is a very interesting as far as the timing of this conversation, because so much news has come out in the last week or so around AI. There's a new ChatGPT strawberry that just got released with PhD level expertise. And I can go into details on how they accomplish that, but it's an amazing improvement. And then you have on the other hand, you have Microsoft coming in with Copilot getting integrated directly into Excel, which is going to be a game changer. So it's no longer cut and paste macros. It's do this in Excel and it's going to magically appear. So there are some very, very amazing pieces of AI that are handling that integration in ways that are much smoother. So when you look at your organization, the real question becomes, how do I future-proof? How do I design my technology environment so I can leverage the latest and greatest as it comes out without significantly having to change different pieces, if that makes sense?
Yes.
And so in that, going back to the same build the right foundation, it's exactly that. We have a new piece coming out of ChatGPT. Here's where we have it integrated. Here's the information, the data that it can now leverage that it couldn't 3 months ago. You already have it ready to serve it, so it can make better decisions. So you can leverage it in a more efficient and a more complete operation than you could in the past. And so that's part of our when we look at the technology environment, when we design and architect, here's how your organization could work. That is a big piece. How do we future-proof? How do we leave and allow for these new technologies to plug in and do it strategically?
Yeah, that's great. And for anyone listening, that approach is extremely thorough and is done in an environment that is really determinant of the decision-making process, right? And I mean, what happens in those environments and when you guys get involved is you're really assisting the decision-making process in the early phase. And listen, I love that idea, right? If you can't help them see a return on investment, it's not a great investment, right? Given your expertise and the time you've been doing this, I think that's fantastic. And, you and I talked about an AI questionnaire. And so talk a little bit about that for a second before we get to our last point here.
So we have a nice little question on our website. It kind of gets a feel for where are you and your organization ready for AI? Are you behind the 8 ball? Do you need some work? Are you ready to leverage it in different costs? And then what steps can you immediately take to start moving down that path? So I'll shoot you a link, Kurt. We can include it as part of the description. But take the questionnaire, dive into some of the knowledge around it, and use some of the traction to start to see if you want to leverage AI and where all you think you could help your organization.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I think that is one of the biggest issues that people face. They don't know what questions to ask or answer. So that is fantastic. Yeah, we will definitely include it in our content link, when we get this released. All right. So my last question, Ryan, thank you very much, by the way. This has been great conversation. My last question is back to this one that I think is effectively at the top of everyone's mind as you start down this path. And it's AI related, it's technology related, but in simplest terms, if I'm a business owner and I'm thinking about spending what could be a reasonable amount of money, resource on this, when you think about competitive advantage and when you and your team get involved and start to help companies think about technology from an outcome perspective, talk to me about not just AI, but other things that you may have seen, and it really doesn't matter how big they are, other things that you've seen that companies have created in a competitive advantage with using technology, and just maybe a couple of ideas, a couple of thoughts that you might have in that.
So I'm going to hop into one that's very near and dear. That's data. So many companies are starting to really understand. EOS has been a big driver of this. Is the KPIs and the metrics on a per person basis, a per role basis. How can we measure what is driving to the business outcomes effectively? How can we then prioritize that, track it, so that you get more of what you're looking for your company? And that can hit many different areas. And so as you drive into those metrics, you can normally start seeing historical. I'm looking backwards first. I'm understanding, here are my financials. I'm understanding, here's what I did, here's what I think is going to work. But as you mature, as you're able to leverage that data more and more effectively, you can move from just looking historical to forecasting, to being predictive, to allowing you to react before things happen. And that is a huge advantage for the companies that want to dive into it. And so instead of them saying, hey, I've seen this, I just finished my month close, and it's the middle of the month, and I'm seeing that we've moved on margin. What do we need to take? You can be saying, I'm seeing a squeeze here. In 2 months, we're going to see an impact, but I want to get ahead of that. One of my favorite examples comes out of the oil and gas industry, where this company was doing upstream oil and gas. So it had details that would track if a well is being drilled or worked over, and all software around that. Their metric, their KPI was not, hey, how many people are logging in? It was not, hey, we have this many wells that are being monitored by the software. It was, how many rigs are stood up in the industry? Because what they found as those rigs were stood up or closed off, that would impact them in 2 or 3 months. And it took years of tracking to say, this data point is the one that we're looking for that's going to allow us to really understand what's coming down the pipeline for our company before it gets here, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's the true power of data. Doesn't have anything to touch with AI, but the nice part about getting to that level, it also prepares your data so you can put AI on top of it.
Yeah.
And so there is a natural progression and a natural maturation of companies as they go through this technology setup that really allows them, going back to our initial conversation, on here's your environment, here's how to future-proof it, here's how to make sure you can continue to leverage the new technology as it comes down.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And that fits well into the Optic tool set and what you're trying to do there. You mentioned predictive data. Mm-hmm. Using data as a predictor, right? And there've been some studies around the idea of leading and lagging measures, and there's actually a very good book written about execution and how leading measures are those things like the number of rigs that are stood up. It's not something that the company was controlling, but it was the impact issue in advance that determined whether or not they were going to make their bills, pay their bills in 2 months. And I think that's so powerful. So maybe as the last thing we talk about is touch on Optic. I'm having seen it, I love it. I think it's brilliant. Having coached my clients about dashboards and why they're so important. Back to your point about instantly being able to see trends, ideas, things that are happening in the business that you may not even have understood. How powerful that technology is, and talk a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap. But yeah, I think Optic was a really, it's great to see it, but it's a great tool. I love it.
Absolutely. So what Optic does, it allows us to quickly consolidate your information from existing software that you're probably already using. Many companies are on QuickBooks or NetSuite or Salesforce. So we can pull that information together and then provide you a library of existing KPIs and metrics for you to choose from. And then you can start to extend it. What it allows you to really do is jumpstart that KPI, that data consolidation journey for your company, and then start to move it forward. Those predictive KPIs, the forecasting ones, are generally company specific, but most companies start looking historical. And so it allows you to start there, really understand, start to track, and then find the associations that allow you to get to that predictive one for your company. The other wonderful thing about Optic, as you pull that data consolidation together, you have your information to make a better decision much faster than in the past. And this is such a game changer, because instead of from a leadership meeting, hey, I need to go research this, I'll get back in a month, you pull up Optic, you dive into the report, and you have it for the entire team to look at in minutes. That allows you to make a more informed decision, a better decision, a data-driven decision much sooner, much faster than you could have otherwise. And that's just the start. Optic also allows a different way to handle process automation across systems. So instead of saying I need one big system to house everything, we can say, oh, we have a new customer just got closed in Salesforce. Go ahead and add that into QuickBooks, all streamlined and navigating through an orchestration engine, which means as you outgrow QuickBooks, as you grow and scale, you can replace that section with a new one, and the automations will still continue to work. You'll have to handle some of the new system, but instead of throwing everything away, you're able to just replace the piece you need. Going all the way back to the future-proofing piece. This allows you to move and change those different systems as you grow and scale to leverage the latest and greatest for your company.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I've seen the power of dashboards, and having looked at Optic, it's, I'll use this colloquialism. It's dashboards on steroids, right? I mean, we'll just, I mean, it seems to me to be that powerful, integrating data and being able to display it for, back to your point, all the important ideas, faster, better, more concise, and consolidated. So I think it's fantastic. Well, Brian, it has been a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed myself, and I hope you have too. I think as folks listen to this, what I'll say is, we'll have the links in the content that we send out so they can certainly get to you, and we'll make sure that they can contact you with anything that they have. They'll have my information, and I can absolutely forward them, and actually we'll put this out as well and a couple of other places for folks to get access to. So let me just say this. Thank you very much for your time today. It was wonderful. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for joining us today for the Stearns Financial Group Practical Business Owner Ideas series. We look forward to having you again. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Kurt.